Welcome to Mommispace. My name is Brianna Bernhard, your hostess, and I am a new mom. I selfishly created this podcast to get some advice and inspiration from the moms in my community who are doing amazing things while raising their families. I've realized motherhood is hard, but knowing I'm not alone in this call makes all the difference, and I hope you feel refreshed as you listen. Welcome to the tribe. Welcome back to Mommispace. This is Bree, and today I am here with Kasey Husen. Kasey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
I know Kasey from Crossroads Church, which is actually one of the main sources of my connections for this, which is very exciting and happy for me. But Kasey was another really influential person for me when I was growing up, learning about worship and how to lead and all of this. So I'm really excited to talk with you today. One, to just connect on a new level, but also to catch up and hear about your life and all that goodness. So I'm really excited that you took time to share with us today. So before we dive in, could you just
excited to be here.
Oh, good. Yay. First, would you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and where you're located, all that good stuff, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, so I am married to Kai, my husband. We live in Corona, California, and I, like Bree said, work for Crossroads Christian Church here in the area, and we're so fortunate to live like a mile away from work, and
Nice.
We just had our first child, Kennedy Grace, and she's going to be a year in just 1 month, so we are just beside ourselves about this whole year passing by. Went by so quickly, but we're loving it. We're loving being new parents, and we dated 4 years before we got married, and then we were married for about 4 years before we had our first baby.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, so that's awesome. I really like to hear kind of the story of how each of my guests became a mom, like what that process looked like. Were you expecting it? Were you planning it? All of that good stuff. So could you kind of share a little bit about your journey before we kind of talk about where you're at now?
Yeah, totally. So we always planned on having kids. The number is still up in the air, but we know we want to have more than one. If that's part of God's plan, we would love to have more than one, possibly more than two.
Nice.
But yeah, as we got married, we wanted to be really intentional about the time that we had just the two of us, and we weren't really. We didn't want to feel the pressure of having to have kids right away. We had some friends, some of our close friends all of our close friends actually got married before us, some had started having kids right away, and others were still waiting. And, especially in the church world, if those who are listening are familiar with the church, you can feel very pressured into stepping into that next stage of life right away. So if you're dating someone, they're pushing you into getting married. If you're married, they're pushing you into having a kid, and it's all with good fun and obviously love behind it, because they just are looking forward to that next stage of life. But we wanted to just take our time. We wanted to travel different places and just enjoy being together. And so, like I said earlier, we were together. We were married for about 4 years before we had Kennedy. And I wouldn't trade that for the world. I love the time that it was just the two of us. But we did not... we weren't sure, how many years we were going to go without having kids, but I am such a planner that as we were getting into that time where I thought, okay, this is a good time for us in terms of our job and just, we're in a home that we love and a neighborhood that we love. And it just kind of seemed like God had provided just the perfect setting, which I, would want to say conditions don't have to be perfect for you to have a baby, but it just felt like, okay, we're approaching the time where we felt like it was right. So, I had actually taken a look at my work schedule, and in the church we have very clear seasons that are higher, higher in work productivity. And so I said, hey, here's our window that I would really like to start trying to have a baby, because that would put us about here when she was born. And so we did. And thankfully, it was very easy for us to get pregnant. That's awesome. So, yeah, we as soon as we started trying, we found out we were pregnant. Wow. And so I would say it was pretty well planned out.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's so funny. I remember that of you, that you were such a really a good organized person, like someone that is really reliable, like knows what you want, and I always appreciated that about you. But that's so funny. I remember when I was at Crossroads, I remember people talking to you and Kai about getting married, and I always appreciated your that's definitely something we want, but not right now. We're just enjoying right now, and I really appreciate that, and think it's a really special thing, especially in the church, because like you said, it's all good intention, with people. Because they know what the different stages, how exciting those things are. But I appreciate you standing on what you want and what you felt was best for you. So that's so cool.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. So you have since gone back to work, right?
Yes.
And I really like to talk to moms who are working, not because I don't think being a full-time mom isn't a full-time job, because it is. But I do like to hear kind of, everybody's different. Everybody needs a different load in that regard. And so I'm excited to hear kind of your process as far as going back to work, what that's looked like for you. Was it what you expected? Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Kennedy was born almost a year ago, and my work at the church actually allows us to bring in our kids for the first 6 months. And we have an elder who is a psychologist and had shared that just that first 6 months with mom and baby is so important for bonding, and especially with breastfeeding or, whatever goals you have in that way. Obviously, it's much easier to be able to be with the baby. So he had gotten our church to a point where our staff was able to bring the kids in for the first 6 months. And so I had been thinking through before, as I was pregnant, and I worked all the way up until the day before I had Kennedy.
Wow.
And I loved it. And thankfully, my health was great, and I didn't experience any complications along the way. And so I got to lead worship. We actually did a Christmas show and everything before.
Way.
Yeah. And so, I actually had people upset with me because I was on stage and, it was dancey and jumpy, and I was 8 months pregnant. And but it was just something that I had done the entire time I was pregnant, that it wasn't out of the norm. And so I loved it. It kept me busy. I think it kept my mind off of, worrying about what it would be like to deliver a child for the first time. And I really think just being that active really helped me in my labor as well. But all that to say, when we had Kennedy, I was able to kind of make an adjustment to what the church was offering. They had offered the 6 months for me to come in after my initial 6 weeks off. But I had asked, just for his schedule was important for me with Kennedy, and I knew long term that once I went back to work, I would want for anybody to be able to watch her and to know when she sleeps and know when she's hungry. Of mine too. I wanted to feel as confident as possible that when she was crying or upset, that I could, pinpoint what that was. And I think every mom gets there at some point. But I wanted to try to get there as quick as I could. So I had a bunch of different resources. And one of the things I thought about was, if I'm going to be this committed to a schedule, I'm not sure, although it's a great offering, I'm not sure I would want to take Kennedy into work with me. You know, I wasn't sure with meetings and all of that stuff that would really be the environment to get her on a consistent nap schedule and feeding schedule and all of that. So I worked with our team, and they really were generous in allowing me to kind of change up that 6 months and work from home 2 days.
Wow.
From home 2 days with Kennedy. And then the other 2 days, my mom was able to watch her, and I would go into the office. And so that was something we were able to work out. Definitely a risk for them. Obviously, it's not something that we offered to everyone as kind of just trialing out what it would be like to work remotely. And and so anyway, we had that agreement for the first 6 months, and it just went so well. And I mean, we had so many different big events and big things happening within the church during that time. I was just really mindful of wanting to prove that, you know, if you hire the right people, they can work remotely and they can be responsible and get their job done, and still be able to have the goal of being home with babies.
Yeah.
So I worked really hard to prove that. 6 months passed, and I thought, oh, this 6 months went by really fast, and it went really well. I wonder if I could ask for a little bit more. And I really stayed close with my boss in weekly meetings, was asking, how is this going? Is there anything that you would want to see differently from me? I was very responsive to emails and to phone calls all day long. You know, I wanted people to know that I was still working, that call me and to engage during those work hours. So he said, yeah, everything's gone well. And I said, okay, well, I would really love to be able to extend this and to try and see if we can do this another few months. And, you know, kind of what I said earlier, we were in one of the biggest seasons as I was at home, and that worked out. So it wasn't as though they could say, we're about to head into whatever, you know, Christmas season, and we feel like you would be more effective here at work. So they gave me an extension, and I am going back to work. I'm going back to work as in physically on campus the entire week in February. So it'll have been 1 full year of staying home for 2 days a week with Kennedy, and it's just been such a blessing. And just practically, for moms listening out there who might have the opportunity to share this with their boss at work and see if it's possible at all. You know, you have to know your work productivity and know if this would work for you or not. Some people need to be surrounded by a lot of different people and feel that energy, and, you know, to be able to accomplish their job, while others can stand to, I kind of liken it to if you've been to college and you've taken online courses. If you did well in online courses because there's a certain discipline that comes along with that, then this might work well for you working remotely. If you feel like you need to be in front of that teacher and with others in the class in order to be held accountable for turning your work or anything like that, then I would say it's probably not for you. So, in January, so this month, we were kind of starting our ramp into me going back to work full time. So we've hired a nanny, and just to kind of ease into this, to my house, Monday and Wednesday mornings, she's here for the morning time, so about 8 o'clock till noon, and I'm at work, and then I come home. So awesome. I'm home the rest of the day, and I work from home. And then in February, she'll watch her the full day. Wow. So that was just kind of our way. You know, obviously, since I've been home with Kennedy for 10 months, we knew it would be a bit of an adjustment for both of us. So we wanted to ease into that as much as possible. But she's already doing so well. We're like so blessed with the person we're able to have here every week, and they're going to do great.
That is so great. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really, I love that, just that perspective on if you did well in online courses or, you know, being away from the classroom environment, essentially, then you're probably going to be better, working remotely or whatever. I think that's a great way to kind of gauge whether or not that's
Frame it
something
up,
you should go after. Yeah, for sure. That's so cool. Awesome.
Yes.
Now, I love to talk about like different passions that we as moms have in life and whether being a mom fuels those things or takes away from them. So could you kind of share a little bit? I'm wondering if some of that has to do with what you're doing for work, like what brings you life and what brings you joy?
Yeah. So as you mentioned earlier, we met doing music within the church and worship leading. And that's just always been a part of my life growing up. I have always been involved using my gifts in the church and part of our worship team. And so I had never thought on the back burner while I have kids, that was just never something in my mind. In our church, I've seen so many women pregnant with multiple kids who have continued to serve and use their gifts. And so I never felt like once I got pregnant, okay, these things are over. And so it was just an adjustment to work with my husband because we were so committed to serving the church that we would have to figure out how to make all of that work on top of our jobs and stuff. So now that's just one aspect of the things that I love to do, but I serve 2 to 3 times a month leading worship for the church. And so that means rehearsals, and it means long days where I can't have Kennedy with me during all the services while I'm out on stage. And so we've kind of had to make some adjustments there. But like I said, with us being so committed to using our gifts in the church and continuing to serve, we've been able to swing it. He's been a huge help in just understanding that refuels me, and it should, for those who are involved in the church who are listening, using your gifts shouldn't be something that drains you. It should be something that fuels you. So we recently went through Christmas season, and we had, I think, 6 or 7 Christmas shows, and again with rehearsals over 2 weeks and stuff like that. It was a lot to ask of my husband, who was working full days also, and then having to come home and and do all of the things like feed her and put her to sleep, and and just not have me around for a good 2 weeks or so. And we had to work through that a little bit, just because he's able to do just as much as I am. I am still breastfeeding. I haven't mentioned that, but I am still breastfeeding, and that might be something you want to dig into too, as far as the working full time. But because I'm still breastfeeding, there is definitely an attachment that Kennedy has to me personally, physically and emotionally, and so it's nice that my husband, though, is able to do pretty much everything else the same, if not better, than I can do. So I'm very fortunate, and we tried our best, again, just having that as an end goal in mind when we started out. I really wanted to make sure that if I was away, he could do just as much as confidently as I do, aside from the breastfeeding, of course. So
that's
that
awesome.
That one. And I'm trying to think what other things. We really haven't experienced much strain when it comes to like if he wants to go out and do the things that refuel him. Obviously, I'm fine with that. I'm trying to think through.
Yeah, that's great.
Examples I can give to anybody, but I think that's just a way we've learned to honor each other, and especially working full time, understanding those refueling moments are they're so great. Oh, I can give a practical one. Even
beautiful.
Right after I had Kennedy, and this is so low on the total pool of enjoyment, but I remember Kai was just so good about allowing me time to just go take a shower and go get my nails done or whatever it was, and he was really mindful of those things, and I never felt like I really had to ask and kind of worry about his response, again, because he was so comfortable being with her right from the beginning. And I would want to encourage if there are any husbands listening, or any moms who are preparing to give birth and are wondering how to set up their family so that they have this dynamic, I would say, just making sure you have dad really involved from the beginning. And again, we were really intentional about those things. I didn't change a diaper for probably the first 2 weeks of having Kennedy, because I would wake up in the middle of the night with her, and she was in the bassinet, and Kai would change her and then bring her to me, and I would feed her, and just those little things we had tried to work out ahead of time. And we had great advice from people around us who, told us these practical things. That's but those kind of things helped me a lot. Feeling the freedom of him saying, hey, go take a shower. I wanted to take a shower in the morning and a shower at night, and it just was like so nice to have my own time. In the first few weeks you can't really go too far, and so the little practical things like that, if you can work that out ahead of time and kind of share between the two of you, especially if you're having your first one, the things that are important to you, I feel like they're a little bit easier to accommodate in the chaos if you've already worked through those things.
So true. That's really good point. Okay, yeah, I for sure want to hear about your breastfeeding journey a little bit. Part of that can tie into like managing your time, because I really would love to go there. I'd really like to breastfeed. Now, are you breastfeeding solely?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, yeah, please share. Please share how you do this.
So, again, I had committed from the beginning that this my goal was to do a year of breastfeeding, and thankfully I had other women around me, similar in age to me, and just in similar roles at my work that I had seen do that. They had made it to a year, cool. And it wasn't easy. I watched them, really advocate for better circumstances for breastfeeding women and things like that. And that's something I love to do too, which is why I've kind of pushed myself to have larger goals this year. Is I love being able to advocate at my workplace, which we're hiring younger and younger, but the people who we are reporting to, they come from a different era as well, and are way out of this life stage. So to be able to kind of remind them of these are now our goals, and this is what we're trying to do. I've loved that whole part of it too. So good. But yeah, I was really confident starting out with breastfeeding, and confident in the way of if I encountered a problem, I knew I was going to do everything I could, to get to a point where I felt confident feeding her. So thankfully it went really well from the beginning there. I remember maybe like 3 months in, she was pretty small. Kennedy was born 6'4", and then she dropped down to 5'14" a couple days later. So which they were saying was fine. But she started putting on weight pretty quickly, like in the first couple of weeks. But then after that, she was pretty steady to gain, a few ounces here and there, never dropping weight. But I think the pressure that the doctors and the nurses put on me every time I took her in with weight checks and stuff like that, at one point really got to me. I remember telling my mom, because they had recommended that I start supplementing formula at one point, and I had read so many different things, and that's another thing I'd encourage women to do is to read different resources that they trust. And I had been prepared ahead of time that there were so many people saying, my doctor's telling me to supplement, but I know that I don't need to if these things are happening. So so as much as I value what the doctors were saying, and it wasn't, I'm making this way bigger than it was, it wasn't a huge deal, but as much as I value what they're telling me, I also had done a ton of research to know if I had a healthy baby or not. So but in the moment, I was still emotional about things, and I was worried that, when she would start to fuss after she ate, did she eat enough? And all the nightmare things that go through your head. And was this a goal that I was pushing too hard for, and something that was going to end up hurting her in the end? And all the things that can flood your mind. So I remember telling my mom, who's just super straight with me, and I trust her, and she said, okay, so let's just go to formula then. You can't be this worried about breastfeeding that you're going to freak out every time you go to feed her or whatever. It's going to end up messing even more with your supply and all this stuff. And so I worked on, I talked with a couple of these women who I worked with and who had breastfed for a long time, and it kind of built up my confidence again. So many of them shared the same stories, that they had been through those same things. And so I felt like, okay,
that's good.
And there's so much adjustment that happens in the first few months, especially with your milk. And the baby's learning you, and you're learning him or her. And I if I could give any advice, I would say don't really make any sudden decisions in the first 3 months, whether it has to do with breastfeeding or anything else. Don't cut your hair off. Just, there's so many things I feel like your body is going through, and you're navigating so many new emotions that you feel like you have to make decisions right there, or it's going to impact their future for 18 years to come. And I think now hindsight is 2020, and being able to see I put a little bit too much pressure on myself to make decisions in that first 3 months. But so we made it through that. And then we just kind of took it. One of the girls at my work said, put little milestones in there, go 3 months, then go 6 months, with the obvious goal of going a year. And at 6 months, celebrate the 6 months, and then get to 9 months and celebrate the 9 months. And so that's what I did, and it got easier and easier. Mechanically it got easier. Working out the timing of when she was going to eat and how much. All of that changes as they get older. You're wondering, how many ounces do I give her today versus a month or two later you're giving her a different amount. So and once I went back to work the 2 days a week, obviously I had to pump. I guess backing up, before I gave birth, the primary resource I went to, and I know that this gets a bad rap a lot of the time, but I checked out a bunch of different books, and we landed on Babywise as the book that seemed to work best with for our family. And that was really because we were looking for a way to provide structure and schedule for her, but really because we're both structured, scheduled people. So that works really well for us. It didn't for most of my friends. Actually, I don't think any of my friends are doing that. So just to kind of put that out there, we have pretty much been alone in that. And we love it. We've had nothing but success, and we have nothing but great things to say about it. But we read those books ahead of time. In fact, the night that Kennedy was born, I think because we just bought in so much to the philosophy within the book, that I was able to really start that the first night. And it wasn't that I set out to say, I'm going to start scheduling her the first night. It was just because I had internalized so much of the why behind those things, that it became natural. And I read it twice, just so you know. I read the book twice during my pregnancy. Good. So kind of like studying for this test, you know. So then the night that she was born, my plan was that I would feed her every 2 hours. Now, my baby was sleepy, and I heard from other moms who were like, my baby didn't sleep the whole night, she was born. But typically they, they're awake and alert for the first hour or two, and then after that they're pretty sleepy. Totally. And so the commitment was tough, because I knew I wanted to feed her every 2 hours, we set alarms around the clock. And we woke up, and she was asleep. We were asleep, and extremely exhausted, obviously. But we got up, we changed her diaper, I fed her, and we put her right back down to sleep. And so I'm going to say within the first 2 weeks of having her, I really noticed that she already had some sort of structure and pattern.
Wow.
Around every 2 hours, you could very visibly see she was. And the whole philosophy behind this book is that you want to, that kids need structure, and they need that from their parents. And when you provide this, essentially you are providing like confidence, and you're providing I'm looking for the word that they're using in the book, but
I can't remember.
I can't remember what it is, but
but I know you mean.
So you're providing confidence for them, and so I've seen it through this
probably
whole
like
year.
Security, I imagine.
Yes. Oh, that's totally it. Yes.
Yeah.
You're providing security for them, and you're really leading the way. And I think that's also a huge point within these books, is that the parent leads and the child doesn't lead. So so starting it from the beginning really set us up on the right track, because we were saying, okay, every 2 hours, which is what the doctors will say too, every 2 to 3 hours be feeding the baby. So we woke up around the clock, we fed her every 2 hours, and then we followed the book's schedule. So when they would say between these weeks, they can go X amount of hours without food. So we would just extend her a little bit, and we were watching her the entire time. We were making sure we weren't pushing her when she wasn't ready to go there. So I just want to say that, because I think when you go to forums and you read about specifically Babywise and schedule, that it can seem as though one size fits all, and you just go there when it says between 3 and 6 weeks they should be able to to go 4 or 5 hours, whatever it is, without eating. And I disagree, and so does the book. It's not a one size fits all thing. You really do need to watch your child and see if they're ready for that. So so because we set it up that way from the beginning, it has given us so much peace throughout this first year. So feeding her, we provided at 7 weeks. She started to sleep through the night without eating. Now, the one time I did feed her I did keep the 11 o'clock dream feed, because she was so small, and she was meeting all of her milestones in terms of growth. She was just on the smaller end of the weight scale. So, so I just didn't feel comfortable letting her go without eating for that long. So I actually, until 9 months, I did the dream feed at 11 o'clock. So every night I would go in, I would pick her up. She was still sleeping, and I would feed her. Now, at a certain point, I would say probably around 6 months, she started to expect that. So she would actually start stirring and wake up at that time, because she knew I was going to come feed her. And I think that's why other research will say drop it earlier and don't wait until later on, because then it actually starts to mess with their sleep. But it was the time I felt most comfortable dropping it. I felt like she was most comfortable, because she did start to sleep through that eventually and not wake up for it. And so I felt like, okay, we're in a good place to drop this now. So again, that just speaks to the one size fits all thing. But so she's been a good sleeper. She's not a great napper, so she'll nap for anywhere from like 50 minutes to an hour and a half, twice a day right now. But she's very active, and I think I just come to terms with she's not a great napper and not consistent. And I don't care because I get my nighttime sleep.
Yeah, totally.
And she seems to do well, with kind of the schedule that she's on for naps during the day. So, but yeah, awesome. So I think I went on a completely different tangent with,
no, that's great. With that. I love hearing it.
But back to the feeding, it's just because of the schedule that we started from the beginning. Yeah. It's given me so much peace to know when she eats, how much she's going to eat. And every mom is different. And again, if you're not, if you would hate to know what you're doing tomorrow because that doesn't feel as spontaneous, as it should, then it's not the thing for you at all.
Totally. That's a good point.
I get that. Yeah, and I get that. I mean, to me, I'm just of that it would I'd probably break out in hives not knowing what I'm doing tomorrow. So, so it's really worked well for us. Example, yesterday I didn't have milk to leave with my mom because my freezer supply went down, probably about 6 or 7 months. I was really going day to day with my pumping schedule. So, and I had to be okay with that. I think there's a little bit of glamour attached to this full freezer of breast milk thing. Yeah. And I had to let go of that because it's just, I got to the end of it and I wasn't going to start waking up at 3 a.m. to, fill a stash. So, but yesterday I worked and she stayed with my mom and I had the luxury of driving up at specific times. I went up there at 11 and I went up there at 3 o'clock and I fed her and went straight back to work.
That's awesome.
But the great I'm speaking to with the schedule is that I knew I could go at 11 and I knew I could go at 3 and that's when she was going to eat. I didn't have to worry about getting an emergency call or anything like that. Yep. So, and you will see if you're doing any sort of scheduling and you're reading any kind of blogs, some people will tell you that messes with your milk supply. Let baby eat whenever they want to eat. And I would say the opposite. I feel like putting her on this routine has really helped both of us. My body has been able to adjust and knows when she's going to eat, and therefore it's prepared for that. It's, we're not going long lengths except for at night. And so that routine, I think, has helped my body.
That's really good.
Be able to adjust to that.
That's awesome. Sweet. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. That's good for me to hear. And just hope probably for a lot of moms who are hoping to do the same. But I do love and appreciate and totally agree with it's not for everybody. But I think specifically as we're talking and pertaining to like working moms, like that might be something that you need more. So, but just observing your baby, paying attention to what they're needing, but also what you're needing too is so important. And so I love that. That's really
good.
And it's a journey.
If you are working too, I would just say if you're committed to breastfeeding, please pump. If you're going to be away from the baby, pumping is so important and it stinks. I hate having to step out of a meeting or, whatever it is to have to pump. And for some, especially if you're in an office with people who are past this life stage or haven't actually been to this life stage, it can feel like you're in a position on their time as well. And I would say just stay committed to it and keep doing it. And it's so rewarding, to be able to stick with it.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. Sweet. Okay. I do like to ask too, how have you taken care of yourself and your heart, in this first year with your baby, especially with having to make sure you're planning all of this stuff? Obviously that's something that's comforting to you, and that structure is really helpful, and I'm sure probably tends to your heart in many ways. But are there some other practical ways that you tend to yourself and to your heart in the day-to-day and the week-to-week?
Yeah, definitely. I have the biggest thing for me is just my relationship with the Lord, and understanding that I need to spend time with him, and I need to spend time in prayer, and just asking for his wisdom in how to lead Kennedy, especially right now as she's getting older. We're already seeing bits and pieces of her personality, which are very strong. I prayed for strong will is the things, and we're seeing it, and I never thought we would see it this early on, but
so cool.
And so just wisdom in how to lead her, and already how to discipline and stuff like that. So just praying for wisdom. My time with the Lord is not always it's not always structured as much as my schedule for my child. So that's kind of funny. But I'd like to tell you, I wake up at this time every day, and I spend time with him, or and then at night the same way. And I don't. My schedule has just been so packed with baby and with work and stuff that really it's throughout the day that I'm pausing to spend time and just ask him for that wisdom, or ask him for peace if I feel a little bit overwhelmed. The other thing is we have a life group that we meet with once a week, and there are moms in that group who have been there, done that, and I know a lot of moms through our church that I'm able to lean on and just ask questions and get advice, and or even just encouragement that that I'm not alone, or that this is, I love hearing, that's not unique. That happened to us too. So, just those kind of things. And I'm so fortunate to work in the environment that I do. I feel like there's constant encouragement. So, I feel for the women who are, I understand most people don't work for a church, and many of them, I'm sure, are not listening. They are listening to your podcast and going, "Cool, you work for a great environment and full of people who treat you well." And I do understand that that's not common, and so finding those groups outside of your workspace, to have encouragement and understand you're not alone. It's really important. Another thing, I love to get my nails done. I love to get my hair done. I like to do all of those things. And so, being able to work out a schedule with my husband where I say, hey, I want to go, did this or that, or I just want to go to lunch and not juggle a baby, and just spend some time catching up. And then again, I think it's just working those things out ahead of time to be able to set that time aside. But I would say those are just some of the ways that I'm taking care of myself and not always mommy.
That's so good. Okay, and then I also like to talk about mom guilt. Have you experienced this? And if so, how do you combat it and overcome it?
Yeah, okay, so my current mom guilt right now is food. So I'm, we started giving Kennedy some table foods here and there once she turned 6 months, because that was the thing I heard was 6 months you start to introduce some table food, knowing she's getting her primary nutrition from breast milk. And, I didn't put too much pressure on myself. I thought I'm going to go the baby-led weaning route, and, I wanted her to be able to eat whatever we were eating at the table. So I did that for a while, but then with working and everything, I ended up going to pouches, and, they're so convenient to just grab one and head out the door. And so I'm in a place now that she's almost a year where I'm realizing, okay, I need to really be more intentional about feeding her solid food, so that she us at the table. So my current mom guilt is just I will bake a sweet potato, and that will be her solid food for the whole day. Then I'm okay, awesome. Eat that at lunchtime, and then eat that at dinner time, and she loves it. But my mom guilt is all about I should be cooking something different for her each time. She doesn't want to eat the same thing twice a day, and so just putting that pressure on myself, and I have to
Yeah.
realize, no, it's more for her about learning to eat these
Yep.
foods, and less about, I don't feel like she's judging me
No,
for
she doesn't know any
for what I'm
different,
cooking
right?
her.
Like,
Exactly.
yeah,
So
totally.
that's my the mom guilt I have right now. The other thing, back when we were doing the show at Christmas time, being
Mm-hmm.
away from her, I started to just think, oh, am I being selfish that I'm, doing something I love while also not being with her to put her to sleep, or you're starting to go through all those things. But really, it was attached to is it okay for me to be doing something I love,
Yeah.
and not being there to take care of her, put her to sleep, feed her, all of that stuff. So I went through some mom guilt in December over that. I go through it quite a bit. I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I think most moms do. So I just try to talk those
That's
things
good.
out with some of the women around me, and let
Yeah.
them laugh with me about how ridiculous
Yeah.
it is. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then we get past it and on to something else.
That's awesome. Okay, and then before we kind of wrap it up, I do like to talk about legacy. I think it's so important that we're like mindful of like what we're leaving to the generations after us. Not like so much to like put pressure on that, but just that the conversation is happening and that we're thinking that way. So when you hear the word legacy, like what do you think about? Like what do you want to leave to Kennedy and hopefully your future kiddos?
That's such a good question. Kai and I have we've started some different things, and added them to our day. We just had her dedicated in December, and so our children's pastor walked us through what child dedication means, and just really it was awesome to hear her perspective, and just she took the, I don't know how I want to say it, but anyway, she really guided us through what that meant, and then what our role was in raising Kennedy, and so that kind of kick-started things we are doing differently throughout the day, just waking up together in the morning and praying with her, and praying over the day. And it's so funny because she really responds to that. We can see the difference in her demeanor, and just that she understands there's something kind of reverent about that experience. And yeah, it's so cool what they pick up on so early.
So cool.
And that's just part of us wanting to, our major goal is to just lead her to a place where she has a personal relationship with Jesus. And so we really love the idea of her seeing us lead out in that over time. We love having her at church with us. Every time I'm not on stage, she's with me at every service, walking around, seeing everybody.
So cool.
I want her to feel a part of what's going on, even from this stage of her life. And because we can't wait for the day that she really truly falls in love with the church, and calls that home herself. So I feel like the legacy portion for us is just to pass down this this faith and these faith experiences, and to hopefully have her call those more personally as she grows. And Kai, my husband, has been raised with two awesome Christian parents, and grew up in a Christian home. My parents are awesome, but I did not grow up in that home. And so just I love the idea of kind of being, I'm somewhat of a first generation Christian in my family. So being able to see cycles broken, and new things built within my family is something I'm looking forward to seeing in Kennedy as she grows.
I love that. Very cool. Yeah, that is so exciting. Just knowing that that's like you're starting something really beautiful for the rest of your family, and I love that. So
yeah.
sweet.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I like to end with some fun questions. The first would be, is there a product, resource that you use for yourself or for Kennedy that you feel like you could not live without?
Ooh, that's good. Okay, I probably just need to say Babywise, the book.
That's great. I love it. Because that's for both of you.
Yes, she just woke up from her nap, so say hi.
Baby girl.
She's like, what are you doing?
Oh, that's awesome. Cool. Babywise.
Yes.
Great answer. And then next would be like, do you guys have a favorite holiday tradition that you're starting with Kennedy or want to start with her at some point?
Ooh, well, we have a cute elf on the shelf in a box for Christmas that we would love to do. We had it out this year, and I was like, I don't think she'll have a clue what this is, but things like that we're excited about doing with her, and we are mindful of wanting to start new traditions with her. This year she just seems so young that she had zero care about opening presents or anything like that. But yeah, so I don't feel like we've started any yet, but we are being mindful of those things.
That's fun. Very cool. Okay, and then last thing would be a piece of advice you'd give to a new mom.
I think it would just be not making any sudden decisions within the first 3 months. Whether that's to do with, like I said, it's like cutting your hair, or all the way up to, especially if you're someone who stresses about the future, and if this then that person, if I do this, then this will happen. I would say things like, okay, we have to move because this house isn't big enough. Those kind of things. I would caution anyone not to make any decisions within those first couple of months that might really impact the long-term future. Because I just think once you get past those 3 months, you start to think a little bit clearer, and your body starts adjusting, or you start feeling like it's your own again. And
not to mention probably getting more sleep, which affects your cognitive functions.
Exactly. Yeah. So they start doing so many things differently after that point, and becoming a little bit more mobile. And so that's my biggest advice is just stick with it for those first 3 months, and don't make any sudden moves.
That's awesome. Very, very good. Kasey, thank you so much for doing this and taking the time out of your day to share with us your journey and some advice. It's been so lovely. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun and good to just be able to process all of these things again, and I love that you're providing a place for so many of us to learn from each other. It's really awesome.
Thank you. And just side note, like, we can find you on social media, right? Like, if there's somebody that has questions about your breastfeeding experience, are you okay with people reaching out to you?
Yes, totally. My Instagram is just Kasey Husen, and then you type that in on Facebook as well, and you can find me.
Perfect. And we'll have all of those links in the show notes as well. So awesome. Thank you so much, Kasey.
Thank you, Bree.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. It was such a pleasure to have you listen in. If you'd like more information about this guest and other guests, you can check that out on Facebook and Instagram at Mommispace. And you can also email me at mommispace@gmail.com if you want more details or have any questions or would just like to get in touch. I'm always looking for new connections. Also, it would mean so much if you could leave us either a rating or review, or both, on iTunes. This just gets the word out about the show. It's a way that we can get more connected with more mamas out there, and it really helps me out as I am doing this on my own, and sometimes I just need a little lift up, y'all. It's good to hear from you that way. Thank you so much again for tuning in. I hope you have an amazing week. Remember, you are loved, you are enough, and you are doing your very best. See you next week, Mama. I know you won't want this forever. Let's see how